Hello and welcome to Called Bank Sports. This is the post-game analysis, the Utah Jazz versus Washington Wizards. And for those of you who don't know, this channel's Jazz focused, so that's kind of where my bias is. If you're seeing a bias at some point in the episode, but this was kind of a rough loss for the Jazz. First off, shout out to the Wizards. Great effort. Bradley Beal put 37 points on the Jazz. Daniel Gafford, even he only put up 12 points, but he and Gobert had some pretty good numbers, but there were like Gafford got some big buckets, and he didn't make it easy on Gobert. Gobert didn't make it easy on Gafford, but there's not many centers who give Gobert tough time when Gobert's on defense and the centers on the offense, especially Daniel Gafford's not someone I expect that. He didn't go off. Like I said, he only had 12 points, but he found some ways around Gobert's defense is what I saw. For the Jazz, like the numbers don't look great. Honestly, I expected the numbers to be a little bit better than they are or were, but I think so I was prepared to come into this video with the take that even though the Jazz numbers, like I didn't think they would be great, but I thought they would be better than they were, and I'll jump into it and talk about those in a sec. But my take is kind of like, even if the numbers were on the Jazz's side, the feeling that I had is, so obviously the Jazz are a better team than the Wizards. Tonight they weren't. The Wizards outplayed them. But I feel like, and the Jazz stayed in it, and honestly, they shouldn't have, because the Jazz weren't shooting great, and the shots that were falling, they were incredible shots. They just weren't high percentage shots, and they just happened to fall. So the Jazz got lucky on a lot of plays, I think. So it's like, I make a lot of analogies to football if you haven't noticed, but sometimes it's easier to understand how one sport works by looking at another sport. But if you watch a football game and you see the score is tied at 21 points and both teams, they have about the same number of stats, there might be one team that is just obviously better, but sometimes as the worst team, you can stay in it by making big and lucky plays. So like, I'm a Texas Longhorns fan, so I'm very used to this, where my team makes big plays that are fun to watch, and then they choke and lose the game anyway. So in football, you might get a pick six, free 7 points right there, or the running back might just break off for a 90-yard run, and that's a huge play that's exciting. But the teams that win in football game in, game out, I know this is a basketball channel, I spend a lot of time on football, but hear me out. The teams that win in football are the teams that can produce a 7 first downs in a drive and win the game that way, and do that every single drive. Maybe they'll throw a pick here and there, but almost every drive they get multiple first downs and can move the ball. And it's not through 90-yard plays. It's through those a 7-yard pass here, a 4-yard run there, and just kind of move down the field as they can. So that's kind of how I felt the Jazz were. The Jazz weren't moving down the field. They were getting some good plays, like that excellent effort play by Jordan Clarkson, where he dives out of bounds, saves the ball, gets up immediately, sprints down. Donovan Mitchell passes it to him. He finds Rudy Gay in the corner. Rudy Gay hits a 3, gets fouled, and one. So those are great plays. I love seeing them. They're really fun to watch as a fan. Those aren't the plays that win you basketball games, though. They're a nice bonus, but they're not the plays that you go down, get set up in your half court, run a play, get an open 3 in the corner. They're not you get an offensive rebound, you outlet, push the ball, you have a 3-on-2 fast break, and you get the bucket that way. So those are the kind of the plays that you need to run those plays consistently, and that's those simple, basic, a lot of times maybe boring plays in basketball were what the Jazz were kind of missing out on this game. And they had plenty of exciting plays. There were some great dunks. There were some great effort plays. There were some circus shots that shouldn't have gone in that went in. And so, because of those, the Jazz made it look like a close game. But other than the first, I don't know, like 5-6 minutes of the first quarter, the Jazz, if it weren't for those like lucky, exciting plays, it would have been a much different game. So getting into that, and before I hop into the numbers, the other thing to look at is, and I know everyone's going to want to talk about this, but that last jump ball. I didn't. I went through and tried to find as many replays as I could. I didn't find any camera angles that I loved, but here's what I broke. So the Jazz are down by, so it was 103 to 106, I believe. And so the Jazz were down by 3. It was on the Wizards side of the court. So the Wizards were on offense. This is jump ball. And so this jump ball is really important. If the Jazz get it, and I think there's like 15 or so, something like 15 seconds left on the clock, maybe a little bit more, less than a full shot clock's worth of time left on the clock. So if the Jazz can win this jump ball, they can get down, hit a 3, tie it, move it into overtime, win it in overtime, which they might have done with that kind of momentum. And the Jazz are the better team. They can recenter and play a good period of basketball. What happens is, so the Jazz win, I forget who's jumping. The Jazz win the jump ball, but the ball goes to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope instead of a Jazz player. So it was not hit to the right spot, and the Wizards get it anyway. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope gets it, gathers, he has his dribble, and Joe Ingles is on him. So Joe Ingles goes and guards him tight. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's on the 3-point line. Kind of explain this moment by moment. You can go watch it if you want, and it might be quicker. But for those of you who haven't seen the game, and then here is my take on it. So Joe Ingles goes and defends him tight. Bradley Beal is right behind Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Joe Ingles is probably thinking Bradley Beal has 37 points. He is the best offensive player on the Wizards. The ball is going to get to Bradley Beal, and then the Jazz need to figure out, is it time to foul, or can they get a stop in enough time? Because fouling doesn't put you in a great situation either. Even if they hit one free throw, it's not a great situation for them. So they're trying to get a stop. Joe Ingles is guarding him tight. Instead of focusing on Kentavious Caldwell-Pope trying to get the stop now, he was trying to read what Bradley Beal was going to do and see if he could, because he was anticipating a pass there. I don't know if Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was planning that and just saw that Joe Ingles was a little bit distracted there, but he takes a dribble, gets around Joe Ingles. It's more of a lateral step, not a step towards the basket. Joe Ingles is distracted. His reaction time is pretty late. He reacts fast enough to get a hand in the face, but pretty late. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope hits a 3 and kind of puts the game out of reach, and then the Jazz missed their 3 close to the buzzer. So that was kind of that. That's how it ended. A little bit of a dramatic ending, but the Jazz already, like, it was not looking good for them even at the jump ball point. So that was kind of the drama that happened right at the end of the game. So yeah, that's kind of my take. This game is rough because the Jazz are a better team than the Wizards. If the Jazz even played like this was honestly one of the worst games for the Jazz so far this year. So even if they played like slightly below average, they probably still could have pulled it off. And this is the second loss in a row to a team that they should have beaten. So it's rough, especially after a decent winning streak. Hopefully the Jazz can turn it around real quick and get another winning streak going on. But okay, I'll go through the numbers now. And if you watched my streams, you know, like, one thing that I'm big on, and this isn't a stream, but like if you watch my post games, I should say, one thing that I'm big on is number of shots taken. It seems like, I don't know, like it doesn't seem like the greatest stat, because sure, like, you can take as many shots as you want, but as a player, I don't think it's a great stat. as far to show how good you're playing as an individual player. As a team, I think it's an excellent stat because especially in the NBA, sure, you can hope to be more efficient, but you're always going to have off nights. And even if you are more efficient, you need to be a lot more efficient if you're taking significantly less shots. So you also need to take into account free throws because sometimes you take a shot, you get fouled, and so that doesn't count in field goals attempted. So you also have to look at free throws attempted as well. And so looking at this, the Jazz took 13 less shots than the Wizards. So off of 2 points, that's a potential 26-point swing. I guess you could add 3. I don't know. You figure out what your multiplier is, but like it's a 26 plus point swing potentially if you make all of those. The Jazz wouldn't have made all of them, but that's plenty to win this game when you lose by 6. The Jazz did take 10 more free throws than the Wizards did, but they only made 3 more, so the free throw shooting wasn't there either. But that's a 10. So like if you calculate that out, there's a 16 point potential points that the Jazz left on the board just because they didn't take as many shots as the Wizards. And you don't take as many shots when you turn the ball over and when you give up offensive rebounds. And so looking at that, and I'll get into the shooting percentages, but looking at that, the Jazz had 3 less offensive rebounds and turned the ball over 7 extra times. Offensive rebounds, that isn't awful. They only had 8 though, so I'd like to see a little bit more on their end of being aggressive, but giving up 11 isn't the worst thing in the world. It'd be nice to be a little bit lower, but it's not awful. The Jazz turning the ball over 16 times is pretty awful, especially since for several games before this, they've been looking pretty good. So right there, the Jazz were kind of set up to lose, and then from there, things just kind of get worse. They shot 43% from the field, 32% from 3, 63% from the free throw line. They could have won the game at the free throw line if they shot. They would have had to shoot pretty good, but they could have won the game at the free throw line. They left 11 points on the line. Rebounding was pretty equal. The Jazz usually out-rebound their opponents. So, like, they lost some stuff there. And here's one stat that I think is huge. The Jazz are normally a team that I don't think they're the best in the league at passing the ball, but they're pretty good at distributing the ball. They only had 17 assists all game. That's pretty awful for the Jazz. So just like, I guess I don't know, like the Jazz had a great first 5 minutes. And I guess one other like good thing that we could pull from the team stats is that even though the Jazz only forced 9 turnovers, they got 14 points from those 9 turnovers. So when they got a turnover, they kind of made those count. So that was good for them. They just only did it 9 times. So if their defense was kind of more there and being more aggressive, forcing more turnovers, that also could have been something that swung the game. So looking at how bad the Jazz played, I honestly think it's pretty good that they only lost by 6. With how many points they left on the line, how many extra shots. Like the Jazz took 81 shots and the Wizards took 94. That's a pretty big discrepancy. Obviously, it's made up a little bit in the free throws. We'd have to go case by case to see how much that actually works. But because obviously there's and ones, and you wouldn't want an extra free throw as an and one to take away from your field goal because it counts as a field goal. Yeah, you get it. I don't want to get too technical there, but top over to the box score. I do want to say here's one thing that I've noticed that I would love to see the Jazz fix. They're in tight games. I feel like, and I don't know if this is court like chicken and the egg situation. So in tight games, it's normally no one can score the basketball except for Donovan Mitchell, and sometimes he has a little bit of help from someone else. That's what happened tonight. He got a little bit of help from Bogey, but like Clarkson put in 12, Gobert put in 11, Bogey put in 18. and then Mitchell put in 32. No one else was in double digits. And we had some players like um, Forrest put up 1 point. Mike Conley wasn't playing, so there's that. The Jazz were a little bit shorthanded, back end of a back-to-back. That's kind of what happens. But even with that, the Jazz should have won this game, and Mitchell was just not getting any help. And when Mitchell doesn't get any help, he shoots probably more than he should. He shot the ball 25 times, which I don't think is outrageous. He made 12 of them, so he was really close to 50%. He was playing fine. His three-pointers, he probably shot a few too many. He was 4 for 12. That wasn't helping much. But another thing that you see with when Mitchell when he feels like he has to take over the game, is he turns the ball over a lot. And so he had 5 turnovers, which definitely didn't help the Jazz. I love when Mitchell shoots in volumes. I think he's an excellent volume scorer, and he can stay efficient while shooting in volumes. What I don't love is players like the team feeling that the ball has to be in Donovan Mitchell's hands in order to make it work. I would like to see, and Donovan Mitchell is an excellent on-ball scorer. He's also a really good off-ball scorer. I'm meaning like the ball comes to him, he doesn't have to dribble to set up the play. Maybe make one setup dribble, and that's it. And the Jazz need to get him scoring more off ball to avoid those turnovers, because I believe Donovan Mitchell will get better at not turning the ball over as much. But right now, when he is a primary ball handler, he usually gets 4 or 5 turnovers, which is really too many for one player. And oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. I was switching things up. Joe Ingles has 1 turnover and but 5 fouls. Mitchell had 5 turnovers, 1 foul, and I thought for a brief second that I had my stats switched up, but no, I'm right. Also, you have Rudy Gobert. He had 4 turnovers, which for a player who doesn't really have the ball in his hands very much, 4 turnovers is way too much for him. He did come in and have 19 rebounds, so kudos for him. He almost brought in 20 boards. That was huge in keeping the game close, but he definitely didn't have a perfect game. He did have 6 blocks as well. So Rudy Gobert did come in and impact the game, but obviously not enough. I don't think he was awful. I think he would agree this wasn't his best game either, even though the box score makes it look really nice. So that's kind of what I saw from this game. No one was really on. Donovan Mitchell felt like he had to force some stuff, which led to extra turnovers. Did lead to 32 points for him. That's why it's nice to have him, because if in games like this, Donovan Mitchell is good enough to keep it close. And if a couple plays went different, the Jazz might be walking away with a sloppy victory today, because Donovan Mitchell is good enough to keep them in games like this. So, honestly, I think this was just an off night. The Jazz have a ton of depth to help kind of hedge against off nights, I guess you could say. And tonight, it just didn't work for them. Too many players had off nights. Mike Conley was out. If he was in, the game probably would have been different. So, but that's kind of how it ended. That's my take on it. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Um, Anything specific that you think uh, might have led to this kind of off night situation? I don't know. I think it was just, these happen sometimes, and the Wizards did an excellent job at putting a bunch of effort in. And also, shout out to the Wizards for, I know I said this at the beginning, but the Jazz had like a 9, or it might have been even bigger than that, but they started off with like 9 unanswered points, which when you start off the game and it's like almost from tip, you're down double digits, that can be really disheartening, and it's not easy to fight back from. They fought back from it pretty quickly, and they stayed in this game. They kept it tight. They were winning most of the game, I believe, and they just pulled it out. So, and Neto, our old friend, he scored 15 on us to make it a little bit tougher for the Jazz. And the Wizards, they had some players who, like, obviously Beal went off for 37, but they had 6 players in double digits, and Kuzma was almost in double digits. So It, it wasn't just Beal. It was a pretty good team effort. Rough loss, like I said. Let's move on to the next one. It's just one game in the season. The Jazz are still fighting for a top 2-3 seed in the West, and this game probably isn't going to tilt the scale. So, with that being said, that's my take on it. I'm happy to hear any takes that you have on this game, but let's hope the Jazz turn around next time. Thanks for watching.